It's Penny and the Professor. What's new?
What's new?
What's new with you? When Penny has a question, the Professor has an answer. She likes to help out everyone. That curious penguin asks all the right questions to help us all learn right along. It's Penny and the Professor. It's Penny and the Professor. Here's Penny.
Hi, kindergarten friends and first grade friends and preschool friends and all of our friends who like to listen to stories of Penny and the Professor. I have Penny here today and her friend Gus. This is Gus. Gus is a little gopher and he has a cousin who is a famous cousin. Do you guys want to know who it is? Punxsutawney Phil. And he is a groundhog. So his groundhog cousin comes out of his little burrow every year on February 2nd and lets all of the people know whether we're going to have a 6 months more of winter or 6 weeks more of winter, or if we're going to have an early spring. So if Phil comes out of his burrow and sees his shadow, it means we're going to have a little bit more time in the cold. And if he comes out and sees no shadow, it means springtime is just around the corner and we're going to have an early spring. Now, today in Wyoming, it's really cold and we're hoping for an early spring. And February 2nd is just around the corner from today. So we want to read a story to you about the time when Gus's cousin Phil couldn't do his job on February 2nd. And he had to find a substitute. Now, a substitute is somebody who takes your place if you can't do your job. So for example, if your teacher is gone from school, there might be a substitute teacher who comes in and teaches you for the day until your teacher can come back. Well, it's a little bit harder to find a substitute for a groundhog, especially on Groundhog Day. Let's see what happens when Phil gets sick right before his big day. Substitute Groundhog. Written by Pat Miller, illustrated by Kathy Ember. Substitute Groundhog by Pat Miller. The day before Groundhog Day, Groundhog woke up sick. His muscles ached and his throat hurt. Oh no, that's never a good sign, is it? Groundhog felt so awful, he went to see Dr. Owl. "You have a bad case of flu, you do," said Dr. Owl. "You need hot clover soup and bed rest for 2 days. "How many?" asked Groundhog. "Two," hooted Dr. Owl. But Groundhog Day was tomorrow. Groundhog couldn't let everyone down because he was too sick to do his job. He tried to think of something. On his way home to bed, Groundhog passed the Heidi Hole Diner. He saw want ads from all over the neighborhood, animals tracked to a nearby tree. Skunk was looking for a roommate again. Mr. and Mrs. Duck were returning north and had their nest for rent. I know what I'll do, Groundhog thought. I'll advertise for a substitute groundhog. So he put up this flyer. Weather teller wanted. No experience needed. Apply at Groundhog's Hole, February 1st at 10 a.m. Thanks, Groundhog. By 10 o'clock, a line of animals waited to try out. Great, said Groundhog with a sneeze. Achoo! Surely one of you can do Groundhog Day for me. Mole was first. You have to go down in my hole, Groundhog told Mole. It's pretty dark down there. No problem, said Mole. My hole is even darker. Mole got comfortable underground. Now come up and look for your shadow, Groundhog shouted. Mole peeked over the edge, his little eyes squinted. Well, Mole, what do you see? Mole spoke to a tree. Is that you, Groundhog? He was talking to a tree. Was that Groundhog? No. Groundhog blew his nose. This won't work. I need someone who sees well. I can see well, said a voice from high overhead. Groundhog looked up and saw Eagle. Eagles have really good eyesight. Eagle swooped down. From the mountain ledge, Groundhog, I could see a bit of owl feather stuck in your fur. I'd say you have been to Dr. Owl recently. Wow, then surely you have no trouble seeing your shadow, said Groundhog. Climb down in the hole and let's practice. Climb down, said Eagle. He looked at the entrance to the hole. Will there be room down there to stretch my wings? He stretched them wide, very wide. Groundhog rubbed his scratchy throat. This won't work. I need someone who sees well and is not bothered by small spaces. Bear stepped up next. My own cave is snug and cozy. Great, said Groundhog. Climb down and let's practice. This is perfect, yelled Bear from the hole. It's even more comfy than my own cave. Come out and take a look, called Groundhog. There was no answer. Groundhog poked his head below ground. Bear, come look for your shadow. What do you guys think Bear is doing? He's not coming out to look for his shadow. What do you think, Penny? Maybe so. She thinks he might be sleeping because bears sleep in the winter. They hibernate. The only answer was deep, slow snore. Groundhog was frustrated. He needed a substitute who could see well, who wasn't bothered by small spaces, and wouldn't fall asleep. I can do it, let me try, Squirrel bounced in front of the line. Okay, said Groundhog. Go down in the hole, come back up, and look for your shadow. Squirrel leaped in. Whee! Then she popped her head back up. Groundhog said, see your shadow? Oh, I forgot to look. Down she went. She popped back up. She dropped back down. I keep forgetting to look, Squirrel giggled. She popped up and down some more. This is fun, she said. But what Groundhog needed was someone who would pop up and stay up. By now, Groundhog was feeling even worse. He thought of his warm bed. Was he ever going to find a substitute? Howdy there, Groundhog. How about giving me a chance? Up stepped a strange-looking creature. My name is Armadillo, she said. You're not from around here, are you? Asked Groundhog. Nope, I'm from Texas, visiting my cousin Badger, she said. But I could do this job. I live in a hole. I like small spaces. I see my shadow just fine, and I will pop up and stay up. Ooh, she sounds like the perfect plan. Groundhog wasn't so sure. Armadillo was a stranger from far away. What did she know about the weather here? But she did have all the qualifications for the job. All right, said Groundhog. Let's see how you do. Armadillo climbed down into the Groundhog's hole. She poked her head up and looked around. Sure enough, she saw her shadow. If that happens tomorrow, tell folks that winter will drag on, said Groundhog. But if you don't see your shadow tomorrow, spring will come early. Got it, said Armadillo. I think you're just the substitute I've been looking for, said Groundhog. You're hired. Thanks, said Armadillo. They shook paws. Then Groundhog climbed down his hole into bed. He sipped warm clover soup. He plumped his pillows and tucked his sore self under his flannel quilts. The next morning, the animals gathered early to hear what Armadillo had to say. Well, it was cold and crisp as the sun peeked over the forest. Badger served hot chocolate. Squirrel bounced and cheered for Armadillo. Eagle flew high above the trees. Muddy Mole looked sleepy, and Bear was still in bed. The animals grew quiet as Armadillo poked her head up and carefully looked around. There on the ground, she saw the shadow of her tiny ears and pointy nose. 6 more weeks of winter, she announced. Armadillo dropped back into Groundhog's hole. Did you hear that, Groundhog? 6 more weeks of winter. Groundhog groaned from his bed. How you feeling, Groundhog? Armadillo asked. A little better, but I'd feel a lot better if it was spring already, Groundhog said. Spring already, said Armadillo. Say, that gives me an idea. Armadillo found Groundhog's suitcase. Get your gear together, Groundhog, she said. It's already spring in Texas. You can come home with me. Really? Said Groundhog. He imagined himself rolling in warm grass instead of sneezing through 6 more weeks of cold. You bet, said Armadillo. Groundhog jumped from his bed. He grabbed his teddy bear and his toothbrush and tossed them into his suitcase. We can hear a helicopter flying over our house right now. Maybe they'll take an airplane or a helicopter to get to Texas. Let's see what it says. I've always wanted to see Texas. Do you think they have cowboy hats in my size? Asked Groundhog. Sure as Texas has a lone star, said Armadillo. Together, they walked through the cold to the bus station. and their shadows followed them all the way there. Now, Penny and I live by an Air Force base, so sometimes we hear helicopters go overhead. I bet you can hear that one. There they go. All right. Thanks for listening to our story. Gus, did you enjoy having reading our story with us? Yeah? So Gus was here today and Penny is here today, and we hope to see you guys next time on Penny and the Professor when we read you another great story. Have an amazing day. Bye for now.